So let's jump over to the second part of the post-game show. Penn State defeats Iowa 31-0. The Hawkeyes seem to have little to no resistance there whatsoever, but I think it's more so the fact that Penn State was just that dominant.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Zach Seyko, your host, joined now by Zane Brancefield, who is helping out the show this season. And before we move any further, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, Zane, you were there as a fan, so you kind of got a different perspective out of this. But Penn State really doing a good job. I don't think it's that because Iowa was a top 25 team, and they could finish as a top 25 team. But Penn State has now put itself into the tier with Michigan and Ohio State. That was my biggest takeaway, is the fact that if you look at this Iowa game, Penn State is now in the same conversation. They have to beat them still. I get it. It doesn't matter. Well, we're in the same category, but you want to be able to get over the mountaintop, not to the mountaintop. And that's where Penn State is right now. They are at the mountaintop. They got to get over the mountaintop, which is Ohio State and Michigan this season, this season's all for a lost cause here. But they dominated Iowa, not because Iowa is lackluster, but because Penn State is just that much better, and they are a college football playoff contender. They're not a pretender. They are a contender this season.
And I think the other big thing about that is, like, Penn State went out there and dominated by doing simple plays. It wasn't like they did anything extravagant.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
They played simple football. Like, we didn't have any super long plays. Aller just threw it to Lambert Smith or Theo Johnson, whoever was just wide open. Maybe for like the longest I think we had was like a 33-yard play, and that was late in the game. And so it was like those simple, like, little first down plays and even getting 5 yards at a time. If that's how Penn State's going to win and keep our guys healthy, like, we haven't seen a lot from Nick Singleton this season. He hasn't been as hot as what he was last year. Same with Katron Allen.
Yeah.
But the fact that Penn State has those weapons and knows what they are capable of just shows that when Penn State goes to play Ohio State or Michigan, or even like in the national playoff, like race against those guys, Penn State's going to take off, because people don't realize how good Penn State's offense is, because they are keeping it on the down low. They're not showing everybody what they're capable of really, like, getting at. And the fact that Iowa is that good of a team and let Penn State score 31 points and the defense didn't give up anything for Penn State, like, I think that just shows Penn State can be that good, and people don't realize that this is just like a portion of what Penn State's capable of.
Yeah, the Hawkeyes I think they are a top 3 defense in the Big Ten. I really do. I think I would go Penn State, Michigan, and then Iowa. Frankly, I really would. Ohio State actually did impress me against Notre Dame. So maybe I'm just trying to be as biased as I can against the Buckeyes here, but the Hawkeyes do have a good defense. It's because they have a bad offense. I will criticize Brian Ferentz's offense left and right. Kirk Ferentz has got to find a way to just casually just give your son the pink slip. Okay, just do it. It won't bother anybody. And Iowa fans certainly know how bad it is. They want Brian Ferentz gone. They even want Kirk Ferentz gone. Some of them as well. But it's a symmetrical type of relationship, Zane. If your offense, and that's why Penn State's defense in 2021 was actually really good, really talented, had a lot of NFL players in the making on that group, and they were coached by Brent Pry. But when you constantly, you're bent, eventually you're going to break. And that's what happened. Penn State's offense is so good this season at sustaining drives. They can play physical. They can play finesse. They can go over the top. They can go underneath. It doesn't matter. Penn State's offense is dynamic in ways that it hasn't been since the prime Joe Moorhead years, when they had Trace McSorley, Saquon Barkley, Chris Godwin, right? All the Mike Gesicki, all those guys, 2016 and 2017. Ricky Ronnie's offenses were good, but they weren't Joe Moorhead's, and they certainly aren't this version of Mike Yurcich's. So Penn State's defense benefits from that as well. They're well rested. They can go over the game plan a little more. Whereas Iowa's defense, from a talent standpoint and an execution standpoint, yes, they are top 3 in the Big Ten. They're top 20 in the nation. Argue with me about it. I don't care. But when your defense is constantly out on the football field, eventually you're going to give up points. And that's what happened. Eventually, Iowa gave up points. They made their stops. And early in the game, it was pretty close. It's like, all right, Penn State really isn't jumping out to an advantage. But this is why the game's played over 4 quarters and not just the one. Because to start for the first 10 minutes, yeah, Penn State and Iowa, it was pretty close. And then Penn State is able to wear you down. The offense isn't helping you out because it's quickly 3 and out off the field. And then the defense is like, man, we got to put our helmets back on and try to stop a well-oiled machine that Penn State is. Penn State isn't just good at sustaining drives. They are good at that. But then they have the talent to take the top off and have the big plays when they need them. But they're just deciding that they don't need them at this point. They want to do that. And James Franklin pointed that out in his press conference yesterday. He said, I had to tell Mike Yurcich, not specifically this, hey, Mike, don't get bored, but remind him, hey, use these plays. Don't kind of sit back because Iowa will, they're still a good football team. They will try to do things to get back into the game, but don't give them a reason to. And I think that's what James Franklin was saying when Iowa's defense can bore you to sleep. And that's when they prey on those instances of your lack of sightedness. Okay. When you don't see the football game as clearly because, hey, we are getting kind of bored. We are getting lulled to sleep. And James Franklin and Mike Yurcich together are doing a good job of making sure that wasn't the case, at least in this instance.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because Penn State's offense had the ball for 45 minutes out there, which is ridiculous.
Almost 100 plays ran by Penn State.
Yeah,
97.
and there's nothing else Iowa can do. If somebody has the ball for that long, they're bound to score at some point. But 31 is crazy, especially for that Iowa defense. But they just get tired. Like you said, Iowa try to tire Penn State out. Well, Penn State has so much depth that's not going to do anything. We have guys to the third string who are just as good as the starters at some positions. Exactly. And so Penn State's able to do that. And it's like the only time Penn State was really slow was at the beginning of the game. We had 4 punts the whole game, which we could get that number down, but 4 punts is not bad at all. And Penn State's going to continue to keep dominating like this. They came out slow. They wanted Iowa to think they were in the game, and then they punched them in the face. And that's going to happen every week. And Penn State, I think the only games Penn State comes out red hot throwing the ball deep because Drew Aller wasn't throwing the ball much that first drive when we got the ball. And so Penn State's going to come out hot against Michigan, Ohio State because they have to strike first to get on the board. But against these next couple opponents, Northwestern, UMass, Penn State might not score even until the second quarter because you got to make it seem like they're still in the game. Let the guys rest and then go out there and let them cook. And Penn State's going to continue to do that and show why they are a top team. And I think Penn State is going to eventually keep working their way up in the rankings. We're up to number 6 now, which first of all, I think we should be higher than that, but that's another discussion. But Penn State's going to keep going. And I think it's something people should keep their eye out for. Is this how good this Penn State team is?
We're looking for your comments. We are getting spammed actually in the YouTube comments section. So we want this to be a conversation. We want to talk some Penn State football with you on this postgame show. So if you got a thought about Iowa, Ohio State, and Michigan, the Northwestern UMass games, and how Penn State should approach these next 3 weeks, let us know. We are going to share some more thoughts about Iowa and then a brief preview of Northwestern in just a moment. First, let's hear from another one of our sponsors of today's episode, and that is Gametime. You got to download the Gametime app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for everything: sports, music, theater, comedy, all those events near you. There are a lot of things to like about the Gametime app experience. First, the flash deals and last minute tickets. I know people that use the Gametime app to find their tickets for Beaver Stadium and the Whiteout game. You get those flash deals and last minute tickets only on the Gametime app, exclusive discounts that are made available to you on those tickets. And it's easy to find and buy tickets in your area. And my favorite feature is personally when you're looking at an event and it's where am I going to sit? Well, Gametime has the perfect view. So you're not guessing when you're buying those tickets what the view is going to be like and how you're going to enjoy the game. Lowest price guarantee and event cancellation protection as well. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that free account. Redeem promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And Locked On is amping up its college football coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time across all the Locked On College YouTube channels. I've done a segment since Penn State is a college football playoff contender, and that's what the show is devoted to, previewing the weekend slate of games, talking about the college football implications, big college football news, and so much more with the talent that the Locked On Podcast Network has to offer. Again, every Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time across all the Locked On College YouTube channels. And then when the show's finished, you can find it wherever you get your podcast to play it back at your disposal. Zane, I think that really Penn State has taken a step forward. Penn State is able to wear down opponents like they haven't had before. I want to try to summarize this as best as I can. Penn State dominated the likes of an Iowa team that probably 2 years ago definitely would have gave them fits. Like the Iowa team, Penn State is now built to take on opponents like Illinois, like Iowa, in the ways that they haven't been able to before. And that tells me everything I need to know that they are, in fact, a college football playoff contender. This isn't some aspiration. They legitimately could go 12-0 here because I like the way that they match up against Michigan. I like the way that they match up against Ohio State. Penn State is actually strategically built to take on the Buckeyes, which is why I like them. I am more confident than I ever have been that they do beat the Buckeyes in this instant. Michigan, they're a good team, and they are hiding what they have to offer. I don't think they've taken a step back. I really do think that they are also a college football playoff contender as well. Penn State is, but Ohio State, a little bit of a slight. They impressed me, though, with the Notre Dame one. They have impressed me, but Penn State is strategically built to take on the likes of a Ryan Day coached Ohio State team. And now they're better equipped to take on Jim Harbaugh-led Michigan teams. So in this instance, Penn State's schedule breaks perfectly with this 3-week window of they can fine-tune the machine that they are against competition that's not going to threaten you in Northwestern UMass, and you have the bye week in the middle there before you get into the heart of your schedule with the Buckeyes, the Terrapins. I'll throw them in there. The Terrapins are a top 25 team, in my opinion, and the Wolverines. So Penn State has an opportunity to avoid injuries, save plays that they're going to need later on in the season, and get those guys who don't have experience, get them the experience they need.
I think it was just looking at how Penn State utilizes their experience and like preparing guys like Drew Aller. Like this was the whole plan, was to like prep Drew Aller to be in this position. Right. But even like KJ Winston had a lot more snaps yesterday, and like I was impressed with that because they need to prep him because like we're like Johnny Dixon next year to the NFL draft, so you gotta get him ready. And Tony Rojas too, getting him more snaps is big for Penn State just to build that depth. And like you said, I also think the Wolverines in Michigan haven't really showed us much. Ohio State, on the other hand, besides Notre Dame, they haven't really been that impressive because like they played Youngstown State and beat them by 20 points. Like they should have beat them by like 30 something. So if they're the same team, but this year I'm not sure yet. So obviously Ohio State was playing Penn State at the same time, so I couldn't watch both games. So I have to watch that back. But Penn State, I think, is on a different level than Ohio State this year. Wolverines in Michigan are obviously the toughest game, but I think Penn State can still get by them. It'll be definitely a tough game. It'll be all on the offense and all the defense to see what can happen. And Penn State's only advantage there is that it is a home game, because otherwise you play that game in Michigan, that Michigan, I think, could win that game easily too. So it's going to be a big toss-up. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what Penn State decides to do. Both teams haven't showed a lot. It's going to be tough scouting for Franklin and Harbaugh because they don't know what to expect.
Exactly. They're concealing a lot of stuff. Yeah.
So it'll be something that most of their scouting is going to come from watching the first half at halftime, trying to figure out how do we stop McCarthy or how do we stop Drew Aller. That's going to be their biggest discussion because you can't really prepare for a game like that. You just have to keep going off of what you do have and be like, oh, we know McCarthy can run. We know Blake Corum will punch it up the middle. But Penn State can only prepare so much if they pull out some crazy play at the middle of the game. and they're not expecting it. They just have to keep getting their defensive guys repetitions, even the second string guys, in case something happens. Like, you don't want to see like a Curtis Jacobs or a Robinson or an Abdul Carter get injured, but if something happens, you need to be able to turn to somebody, whether that's Tony Rojas or somebody else off the bench, or even just giving Dominic DeLuca more snaps, and just being able to trust them is going to be Penn State's biggest opportunity and most important keys going into the next couple weeks of their toughest part of the season.
And James Franklin has admitted that Penn State, at least at this point in time, is in a position where Trey Wallace played last night, but he certainly wasn't a focal point in the offense. It was Keandre Lambert-Smith. It was the tight ends, right? The tight ends got involved in the passing game, which was great. Theo Johnson had more receiving yards. Tyler Warren caught 2 touchdowns. Drew Aller threw 4 touchdowns in that game. They were able, James Franklin said it after post-practice in the middle of the week, that Amari Evans and Trey Wallace were available, but we don't have to use them because they're not 100%. We want them to be 100%, but Penn State's in a position where not only can they conceal those plays, but they can conceal the players too. They don't have to force guys into, they can bench Olu Fashanu halfway through the game if they want. And I know that was Delaware, right? They did that with Delaware, with Norzad and Fashanu. But Trey Wallace doesn't need to be on the field, and they need him, but they need him. They will need him for Ohio State, and they will need him for Michigan. So Penn State is playing the long game with all of that. Now, I think that should put a lid on Iowa, 31-0. They got to figure it out with Brian Ferentz, because the defense is really good, but Iowa's not going to be. They could win the Big Ten West, and Penn State could hypothetically see Iowa again. And I think Penn State, the Penn State team that we know is coming, but we just don't. Most people don't know how great this team is. That one that could hypothetically make a Big Ten championship would absolutely embarrass the likes of Wisconsin and Iowa. Northwestern, they got to go through them next week. Penn State is actually currently a 26-point favorite. Our thoughts on them in just a second, but a word from DoorDash. Do you love the convenience of getting what you want right to your door? With DoorDash grocery delivery, you can stock up for the week or order last-minute cravings conveniently. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites, and now you can get grocery delivery that actually delivers. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll find the best in your neighborhood and boost your local economy with each and every order. You'll get exactly what you ordered, or we're going to make it right. So sit back and enjoy quality groceries just like you picked them out yourself. Get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to a $20 value when you use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off up to $20, no minimum subtotal, and 0 delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Don't forget, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. Locked On Nittany Lions is your go-to podcast for HappyValleyInsider.com. Penn State rivals, check them out. Dylan coming over to help us out on the live post-game show in the first segment. HappyValleyInsider.com, talking Penn State football, and now recruiting in the mix as well. Before we get to Northwestern, we got another comment on the live post-game show. Again, we want to hear from you. And Josh says, great win by Penn State last night against an offenseless Hawkeyes. I like that terminology. CBS Sports did a decent job of covering the whiteout game, which Fox Sports would have marketed it more than CBS Sports. That's true, but Fox they are hell-bent on putting that game at noon. And I've had episodes and podcasts about this. The everydayers, I hope you're tuned in, and maybe some people will be able to say this in the comments, but Penn State does not want to white out at 12 o'clock, 3:30. It needs to be at night, and it needs to be earlier in the season, because look what happened. I'm surprised that the attendance was as good as it was, but just imagine, instead of rain and upper 50s, maybe low 60s, you get 30s, snow, or just that cold, frigid rain. It doesn't even have to be snow. It just has to be that nasty. It has to be that nasty rain. Not a lot of people are going to go to that game. Okay. So Penn State strategically wants that game at night because the whiteout just pops in the nighttime atmosphere. Okay. Everybody's dressed in white, and it just has that bright feeling in a darker aura. But also the weather's a factor, and then opponent. Okay. Penn State wants Michigan ideally to be the whiteout game, but that's in November, and you can't predict the weather to that point out. You just assume that it's going to be bad and frigid. And Fox, the network, who, like I said, is adamant that they put the primetime games for their season, for their broadcast season at noon. Penn State's not going to put a whiteout at noon. They've done the afternoon whiteouts before. They're not doing it again. Pat Kraft, James Franklin are not doing that. So it's going to be a nighttime. It depends on who the opponent is, the weather, and when they kick that game off and what network ultimately picks it up. And since Fox wants to put it at noon, then that's on them. So Penn State just simply won't do business. Another comment from Josh. Appreciate the conversation here. Josh says Penn State got really good last year when they implemented the tight ends more. So I hope it opens up the Penn State offense approach this year. The next two games are all about running the ball at will against Northwestern. Brenton Strange offered a lot more value than I think we gave him credit for. Brenton Strange is actually really good at blocking. Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren, I think there's a little bit of a misconception here. I am not a fan of Theo Johnson as a blocker. I think when he moves on to the NFL, he's going to be purely a Y tight end. Because Penn State right now is in a position where they can conceal the playbook. They don't need to open it up as much. Penn State is using Theo Johnson as a blocker when that's just not his game. Can he block? Yes, he has to. He's a tight end. But really, he's a unicorn type of receiver. I think whichever team gets him and is able to implement him in a more comfortable setting with his skill set, Theo Johnson could have a very nice career as an NFL pass-catching tight end. He's just not a blocker. Then with Tyler Warren's okay at blocking, but not to the extent of Brenton Strange would drive people out of the stadium if he could, right? Brenton Strange, the part of the reason there were so many more explosive plays last season has to do that there's a drop-off from the wide receiver blocking. There's also a drop-off from the tight end blocking, and Brenton Strange was a big part of that. So, yes, the tight ends were utilized more because Brenton Strange was a lot better than we gave him credit for, and that's why the Jacksonville Jaguars selected him in the second round. Josh, again, says USC will be next year. I totally agree. I think I said that a while ago, because you need content for the offseason, right? It's been a while since I've had that discussion, but USC will be the whiteout game. This is my prediction, but it's going to come true. USC will be the whiteout game. It will also be Penn State's first Big Ten home opener in a decade and a half, right? They've been on the road to open up Big Ten play 14 out of the last 15 seasons. Pat Kraft's not going to let that happen again now that he's fully entrenched as the athletic director. They will make USC the whiteout game, and it will be the Big Ten home opener in Beaver Stadium next season for 2024. But now let's talk Northwestern, right? I think I've rambled a lot on this second half of the post-game show. Northwestern coming in. Obviously, they're unranked. This game is going to be in Evanston on Saturday, September 30th. It is a 12 p.m. kickoff, and it will be Penn State is a 26-point favorite. The total is 46.5. And coverage will be brought to you by the Big Ten Network. For Northwestern, they are 2-2. I was just being funny when I said that the win total over under is going to be 0.5. They beat UTEP. That surprisingly enough, they beat Minnesota. That is not a game that PJ Fleck and the Golden Gophers should have lost. I think Minnesota still wins that game 9 times out of 10, but you got to win the game that you don't play it 10 times. It's not like the NBA with series. You got to win the game that you're playing on the football field. Northwestern does play Howard, so they are going to win about 3 games this season. Penn State won't be one of them. Penn State 4-0. 6th in the AP polls. They moved up to number 6. They actually jumped USC because USC, surprising outcome against Arizona State. But that's what really at a base level, what you need to know about Northwestern. Ben Bryant's the starting quarterback, transfer from Cincinnati. David Braun's the head coach, interim. The entire staff is still intact for Northwestern, just minus Pat Fitzgerald. So you still have the Pat Fitzgerald mentality. It's just being expressed through the remaining coaches and the players. But Cam Porter, I think, is a good running back. Like he's talented, but he doesn't have the complementary parts. He doesn't have the offensive line to help him out, the passing game to take off some pressure, the quarterback as well, the defense to be able to get opposing offenses off the field in 3 and outs. Because I like Cam Porter a lot. Him and Evan Hull is a dynamic duo for Northwestern when this team was a little better in a better situation. I hate to see what's going on here. I'm not going to comment on Pat Fitzgerald, but I just don't like to see a Northwestern program that you think is kind of the beacon of standards, and the Wildcats are just in a very, low spot right now. But they're doing what they can to fight, and you got to respect the teams that are just going to. They'll try to throw the kitchen sink at Penn State because they got nothing to lose except the game, but they're going to lose that game. Penn State should easily win by 4 touchdowns on the road. Even if they do play the backups earlier than that, the backups, if Penn State played its backups, their second and third stringers the whole game, they'd still win the game by 2 touchdowns against this Northwestern team.
I definitely agree with you with the Penn State win by 2 touchdowns with the backups. You put Bo Perbola in, he's gonna probably rush for 2 touchdowns himself.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Penn State's easily gonna win that game because if you look at what Northwestern's doing, their defense is terrible. They gave up like, what was it, 34 points last night to Minnesota. They gave up 38 to Duke. You gave up 24 to Rutgers. Penn State's offense is a lot better than all those teams. Like, yes, Duke is having a better season this year than what they normally do, but Penn State's offense could like cover that. You said the total was like 46 points. Penn State could score 46 points alone without the help of Northwestern. And I don't know if Northwestern can even score on Penn State. They maybe get one garbage touchdown or field goal, maybe like late in the game if it's like the third, fourth string defense, but I don't see how Northwestern can do anything. Yes, their quarterback had a great game against Minnesota with over 300 passing yards, but we're talking about like Penn State's defense. We're not talking about a Minnesota defense. A Minnesota team that was good a few years ago when they beat Penn State, but that's a different Minnesota team. This one this year, they're going to be lucky if they break 5-6 wins because they don't have the same talent they do. Yes, they still have their quarterback, and he's decent quarterback, but if you don't have defense, that's not going to do anything. So yes, Northwestern beat them, but Penn State's going to run through them like a freight train, and Northwestern's not going to know what happened. They're going in there, like you said, they have nothing to lose. They're going to play their hearts out. It is a home game for them, but I just don't think there's anything they can do to prepare themselves at this point in the season after already playing 4 games. And obviously, everybody knows that Penn State hasn't shown their true colors, just like Michigan hasn't. So we had a comment about saying like Penn State might utilize the run game. I think they could utilize the run game, especially early on, just to save Drew Aller from giving up more offensive plays for scouting reports for Michigan. But I don't think there's anything that Northwestern can do to stop Aller or Katron Allen. And I think even if you throw Trey Potts in there too, he's been playing pretty good ball too. So I think all 3 of those guys and Bo Perbola obviously are just going to run through Northwestern. And the pass game, maybe we'll have a couple guys break 50 yards, but the running game is going to slam right through them because that's just where the weakness is going to be for Northwestern.
Another comment from Josh. Appreciate the conversation. Northwestern is always a scary place to play in Evanston, Ryan Field. Penn State will play a similar game plan, wearing out the Wildcats like they did against Illinois and Iowa. Yes, that's exactly the case. So Josh is spot on, and I think we all are when we say that Penn State doesn't need to do anything different. They're going to run the same 12 personnel. They can get away with it right now, and it's kind of which way does it break, because what team is going to be best prepared for the unknown? Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan are all going into those games like, whoa, we have not seen the real version of these teams. And I think it's the quarterback. Drew Aller is the obvious difference maker here. We have seen it. We've seen glimpses of it. But Drew Aller is the fact that Penn State will be able to hurt you with the ground game with Singleton and Allen. Again, I think they're being stubborn by running all the inside zone because they're trying to figure it out. Okay, what needs to work with the interior of the offensive line so that we can get better plays out of the middle ground game. But the outside zone is going to be good for Penn State. They're going to drop some better passing plays. It's just different watching Drew Aller with the timing to sideline passes. The ball is there when the receiver turns his head around and it's right, accurate. He doesn't have to move. Like Drew Aller, the only time that Drew Aller has thrown like, well, why did that ball just completely sail, or where was that one, is because of a simple miscommunication. So other than Penn State cleaning up some communication issues on offense, maybe especially in the passing game, I really don't see any issues. Clean up the inside ground game, the communication issues with the wide receivers, and that will come in time. Dante Cephas is still new. This is still a first-year starting quarterback. I think Penn State is set up very perfectly I'm thinking something for Northwestern, somewhere in the neighborhood. And these are the games to do it. Clean up the communication, work on, fine tune those little things so that they're not an issue for Ohio State and Michigan. I'm thinking Penn State wins because I think Penn State can shut out Northwestern. And I'm going to take that back-to-back shutouts. I'm thinking something like maybe a 45-0, 49-0. Like you said, Penn State could put up 40 plus points by themselves and cover that total on their own, Zane.
Yeah, just like you said, Penn State is easily going to cover. We've had some comments people have been saying about Penn State's defense being like one of the best in the nation, and I think it was pretty evident, like just yesterday and also a couple weeks ago when they played Delaware, getting 5 turnovers then and getting 2 turnovers yesterday. But the other thing is Penn State, like they have so many defensive schemes, and Manny Diaz like runs a defense so well that there's also defensive plays that people overlook that Penn State hasn't ran yet. Like when it comes time to play Ohio State, there's plays Manny has ready, prepared just for stopping Marvin Harrison Jr. There's plays that he has just to stop Blake Corum or J.J. McCarthy when they play Michigan. Like people want to say, oh, like the offense, yeah, there's offensive plays that they don't know, but there's defensive plays they don't know either. Same with special teams. I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State throws out some kind of onside kick craziness when they play a Michigan team at home in front of a crowd.
I don't think they need to, though. I don't think they need to, though. That's it. I get what you're saying. Pull out the surprises, and that's what Penn State's going to do. But that's they're not in a position anymore where they have to fake field goals against Michigan, because I totally get what you're saying, Zane. And I'm not trying to say you're wrong, but they're now in a position where they don't need to do that kind of crazy stuff. So the onside kicks, the fake field goals, because if Penn State made both of their field goals in that Michigan game, I was having that conversation just yesterday at when the Iowa Penn State game was going on. Penn State should have won that game, but they were so desperate to get wins against those top teams. They didn't believe in themselves. They felt like they needed to just totally scrap a game plan when they were good enough. You make both those field goals, Penn State wins 23-21 and ruins Michigan's college football playoff hopes. They are not in a position where they need to do that because they can win with their base game plan. They will have deviations of it, but not something like, whoa, we got to take a gamble, 100-1 odds type of thing and really risk it. They don't need to do that. They can win behind Drew Aller, Nicholas Singleton, this defense carrying the Nittany Lions to the finish line. And that's nice to know, given what we've seen over 2020 and 2021. I think that's where we should finish it up, Zane, here, is that Penn State is a college football playoff contender. They showed it against Iowa that when they want to turn the jets on, when they want to put the pedal to the metal, they can and they will. And Penn State fans should be pretty excited about what's to come. 12-0 is in the cards. A college football playoff berth is definitely it's not a, well, we're hopeful. No, this is a significant possibility for Penn State. And the schedule opens up in a way that significantly benefits the Nittany Lions with Northwestern, the bye week, and UMass, all leading up to Ohio State. Become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions wherever you get your podcasts and on the YouTube. Follow Zane on X, on Twitter. You can follow myself on X and Twitter. Same thing, the Locked On Nittany Lions podcast. You can follow the show as well. And keep it right here because more Penn State football content and recruiting news is on the way here on Locked On Nittany Lions.